All right, welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take a whole stack of sources, research, all of it, and we distill it down so you are instantly well-informed. We don't just, skim the surface here. We go right into the deep end, into the most challenging, sometimes uncomfortable complexities of a topic. And today, we are doing exactly that. We're directly addressing a narrative that, well, it just constantly comes up. It's often fueled by a lot of misinformation. It's the claim that Islam, at its core, treats women as inferior. Now, in past dives, we've kind of established the historical and fundamental dignity Islam provides women. But, general principles, they aren't really enough when you're faced with specific, really difficult questions.
That's right.
So we've gathered all the source material to tackle the three most challenging rulings head-on. These are the points of critique that get thrown at, well, every Muslim community on the planet.
They really do.
And they demand clear, detailed answers that go way beyond just a surface-level emotional reaction.
Absolutely. It has to be surgical. We're not here for apologetics.
Yeah.
It's about an analytical exploration of the texts, of the sources you've provided, to really understand the true legal and societal function of these rulings.
Right.
We have to try and move past our own modern cultural bias to see the universal nature of the law.
Okay, so lay it out for us. What's the roadmap for this dive?
So for you, the listener, we've got three main points. First, we're going to examine the ruling that allows a man to have up to 4 wives.
The big one.
The big one. How is the system legally structured? And how is it a restriction, not a command? Second, we're going to decode the inheritance ruling.
A half share.
The half share for women, why? And how does that fit into a much larger system of mandatory financial justice? And finally, the toughest nut to crack, Surah An-Nisa, verse 34.
Does the Qur'an command or even, encourage hitting women? We have to deconstruct that whole 3-step therapeutic model it presents.
That's the plan.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with a ruling that I think for most people looking through a modern Western monogamous lens causes the most initial shock.
Polygamy.
Polygamy. The allowance for a man to marry up to 4 wives. The immediate assumption is, well, this is a system just designed to devalue women, to make them replaceable or secondary.
That's the immediate reaction, yeah.
But the fundamental concept we have to grasp right from the start, and this is, I think, the first really big insight from the sources, is that this allowance is a restriction.
A restriction.
Not a command, not an encouragement. It's permission, but it's granted for exceptional circumstances, and it's surrounded by these incredibly strict boundaries.
And to really, truly appreciate this, we have to zoom out. We have to look at the historical context of, 7th century Arabia.
What was it like then?
When Islam emerged, polygamy wasn't some new thing. It wasn't an innovation. It was, for all intents and purposes, the default setting.
So it was already happening everywhere.
Everywhere. And it was absolutely uncontrolled. The sources, they detail what this chaos looked like. You had men marrying 8, 10, 12 wives, often without any real distinction between them, not providing for them properly, and often just abandoning them without any legal recourse for the woman.
So when the ruling in the Qur'an came down,
it didn't increase the number from 1 to 4. It did the exact opposite. It radically reduced the number of allowable wives from that uncontrolled, chaotic situation down to an absolute maximum of 4.
a hard ceiling.
A hard ceiling. And critically, it introduced the necessary legal framework to protect the women involved. This was a regulatory act, an act of restraint meant to solve massive pre-existing social problems.
That completely reframes the entire discussion, doesn't it? It moves it from why did Islam allow this to how did Islam stop the abuse of this widespread practice?
Precisely.
But that still begs the question for the modern listener. I mean, if monogamy is clearly the preferred state and the conditions for polygamy are so incredibly difficult to meet, why leave the permission open at all?
That's a crucial question, and it really brings us to the universality of the Qur'an. See, the Qur'an is intended to be the rule book for all societies, right?
For all time.
Across all cultures, all eras, until the end of time. So it couldn't establish a system that was only applicable to one narrow culture in one narrow century. It had to be universal.
So it needed to have solutions for problems that might not exist right now, but could exist in the future or in other parts of the world.
Exactly. It needed to establish a system that offered practical solutions for all the difficult, complex, and sometimes, tragic conditions that might arise globally in any era. This is where those exceptional, necessary scenarios come into play.
And the most common scenario cited in the sources, it relates to demographics and conflict. We touched on World War I and World War II, where you have these catastrophic male losses.
Right.
And suddenly you're left with millions of women widowed and children orphaned.
Exactly. When a society loses a disproportionate number of men, you instantly create a massive population of dependents. Widows, orphaned children, they lack a provider, a protector, security.
They're vulnerable.
They're extremely vulnerable. And in those extreme scenarios, the permission for polygamy becomes, well, it becomes essential. It's for community survival and for social justice.
So it serves a humanitarian function.
It serves two primary humanitarian functions. First, it protects and cares for these dependents, offering them a secure family unit rather than leaving them vulnerable to destitution, to poverty, to exploitation.
Okay.
And the second?
The second is it's a practical measure to ensure the nation's population can recover and grow rather than just collapsing demographically under the weight of that conflict. It transitions what might be an individual desire into a critical societal safeguard.
So it's a social system that recognizes not everyone can or will fit into that ideal monogamous unit, especially when a whole community is struck by tragedy. But what about, beyond wartime? Are there other exceptional scenarios where this provision might serve a necessary function? There are. The sources outline several practical considerations that are, well, universal to the human condition. Think about the medical reality of infertility or a long-term incapacitating illness.
Okay.
So imagine a man and a woman who are deeply committed to each other. They love each other. They have a successful life together, but they discover the wife is infertile. Or maybe she develops a severe chronic illness that prevents intimacy or prevents her from managing a large family.
The options there are pretty stark, aren't they?
They are. The modern alternatives are what? Separation, which could destroy both individuals emotionally, or the husband secretly resorting to illegitimate relationships, which we know causes immense societal harm.
So polygamy offers a third path.
It offers a third path. The man can marry a second wife with the full knowledge and maybe even the support of the first wife. It preserves the core relationship while meeting necessary needs, whether that's the need for children or companionship. It regularizes a very difficult human reality.
That's a powerful point. It's a mechanism to maintain family cohesion. Even when you're facing these profound physical or biological challenges, it prevents a man from being forced to choose between his core relationship and his, natural desire for family expansion.
And we also have to consider the initial conversion context, as we noted before.
Right.
If Islam had demanded that any person, say in sub-Saharan Africa or historically in parts of Asia, who already had 4 or 5 wives, if it demanded he immediately divorce all but one to enter the faith,
You would have created chaos.
social havoc, and you would have pushed huge swaths of the population away from the faith entirely. Their eternal life depends on entering Islam, and the legal framework needed that flexibility to accommodate existing cultural structures upon conversion.
So it allowed those unions to be regulated and protected, rather than just dissolving families overnight.
Exactly. It's an example of the law being merciful and gradual in its implementation across diverse cultures over 1,400 years.
Okay, let's bring this into the modern world, which you highlighted earlier. There's a modern irony here, which is that societies that legally enforce monogamy are, in practice, just full of illegitimate polygamy.
Right.
The source you gave us cites the 2022 General Social Survey, the GSS, in the U.S. The numbers on infidelity they're impossible to ignore.
They are staggering. The GSS found that 20% of married men admitted to having cheated. 20%.
That translates to millions of secret, dishonest, emotionally destructive relationships.
It's illegitimate polygamy, and it's operating completely outside the bounds of law, of protection, of transparency.
And this causes profound societal harm. I mean, it breeds deceit, it undermines trust, and it financially and emotionally devastates the first wife and any children involved.
And this is the critical contrast. Islam doesn't look away from human nature, it regulates it.
Right.
Instead of fostering these secret affairs and all the dishonesty that comes with them, Islam offers a highly regulated path to build a family openly, transparently, and within the bounds of law.
Where everyone is protected.
Where every wife and every child is equally protected, legally recognized, and financially provided for, it channels an existing, albeit challenging, human reality into a responsible framework.
Okay, but here is where my skepticism, and I think the listeners, really comes in. This permission is conditional on a deeply serious rule. The man must treat all wives with complete and absolute justice. Practically, how does a judicial system, or even the family itself, measure emotional justice? It's easy to measure money, But how do you stop a man from exploiting this by being technically fair financially, but, emotionally cruel to one wife?
That is the very crux of the system, and the sources are clear that the definition of justice goes far beyond the ledger book. It's not just about financial provision, which is mandatory and, easily quantifiable.
It's more than that.
It's much more. It involves showing emotional care, companionship, respect, and attention to all their needs equitably. The law holds the man responsible for the emotional climate of the home.
So if a woman feels neglected, emotionally abandoned, she has recourse.
She absolutely has recourse. If she feels he's intentionally depriving her of companionship while showering the other wife with affection, she can legally argue that the mandatory condition of justice has been violated.
And what happens then?
That can lead to arbitration or, ultimately, divorce with full financial compensation.
So the law is actually designed to hold a man accountable for the fair distribution of his heart and his time, not just his bank account. That is a massive difference from just a casual permission.
It is. And this is why the Qur'an itself begins to lean so heavily, almost forcefully, toward monogamy. Islam emphasizes monogamy by immediately stating this huge caveat, but if you fear that you will not be just, then marry only one.
That phrase alone.
It sets the bar so high that it makes the exception terrifyingly difficult to meet.
And if that wasn't enough of a deterrent, there's another verse that highlights the inherent difficulty of spreading your heart equally.
Yeah.
It acknowledges the reality of human emotion.
Yes. You will never be able to treat your wives with equal fairness, however much you may desire to do so.
Which sounds like a contradiction.
It's not, though. That verse is essential because it distinguishes between the human, internal, emotional state and the external legal requirement of justice.
Okay, break that down.
It's telling the man, look, you cannot control who your heart naturally gravitates toward. That's human. But you must control your actions, your provision, and your equitable treatment of their rights. If you know you cannot meet that external standard, you are forbidden from even trying.
Given how difficult that standard of emotional and practical justice is, and given the explicit acknowledgement that humans struggle with this, why was the permission left open at all? Why risk such a severe spiritual penalty?
Well, the permission remains open because, as we discussed, the societal need for it, those exceptional scenarios like war, infertility, necessary conversions, that need supersedes the preference for monogamy in those specific restricted cases.
It's a systemic solution for a small percentage of situations.
Exactly. But the consequences of failure they are indeed terrifying. They act as the ultimate deterrent. The source shares that warning from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, regarding injustice.
This is the one that really stood out to me.
He said that a man who has 2 wives and is inclined to only one of them will come on the day of resurrection with the side hanging down.
Meaning with one side of his body paralyzed.
Paralyzed. This isn't just a metaphor for punishment. It symbolizes a profound spiritual imbalance and failure. It elevates the responsibility to such a terrifying degree that only those truly capable of upholding that divine equity would dare attempt it.
It's a mechanism of protection, really, making sure men understand the severe moral and spiritual danger of crossing that line.
It is a divine mandate for equity, not a suggestion.
And this also shifts the power dynamic a bit, because the woman is never just a passive recipient of this ruling, is she?
Absolutely not. A woman retains immense power and choice within this framework. She has the right to stipulate a precondition in her marriage contract. It's a legally binding clause. A shart, yes. She can state, "You will not marry another woman besides me."
And if the man agrees to that and signs the contract,
he is legally and contractually bound to monogamy. If he breaks that promise, she has immediate grounds for divorce and a full financial settlement because he breached the contract. This puts the power of choice and negotiation firmly in her hands from the very beginning.
Is that something that's commonly used?
Its use varies by culture and region, but it's a well-established and recognized legal right for women. It's a powerful tool for those who want that explicit guarantee.
And if a woman does choose to enter a polygynous marriage as a second, third, or fourth wife, she has to do so freely.
Of course. Coercion is strictly prohibited. She's choosing that environment, presumably with your eyes open to the dynamics, and she has the benefit of all these strict legal protections, mandatory financial provision, and that severe divine warning against injustice hanging over her husband's head.
It's no wonder the practice is rare today among Muslims.
It's rare, precisely because the immense difficulty and the terrifying legal and spiritual risk outweigh the casual desire for most men.
So it's an allowance born out of societal necessity.
Yeah.
but hedged in by overwhelming legal restrictions and spiritual warnings.
Hmm.
That is a truly nuanced perspective that propaganda always ignores.
Always.
Let's pivot now to the next major misconception. This one seems purely mathematical. The matter of inheritance. Why does a woman receive half the share of inheritance compared to a man? Is this truly unfair?
Okay, so again, we have to reset the clock. We have to look at the historical context surrounding property rights, which is so often forgotten in this debate.
Before Islam.
Before Islam, women often had no inheritance rights at all, none. They were frequently considered property to be inherited, not owners of property.
And even in the West, this was a long time coming.
A very long time. Our source material reminds us that women didn't gain legal rights to inherit and control property in major Western nations like the UK and the US until the 1800s.
Through things like the Married Women's Property Acts.
Exactly. Islam instituted comprehensive inheritance rights for women over 14 centuries ago. So the question isn't if they receive inheritance, but how much relative to the man.
And the common perception is that half automatically equals unfair. But as we've learned, we have to be really careful not to confuse equality with justice.
That is the core legal principle driving this entire system. True justice, according to the sources, is giving shares according to people's responsibilities.
So if responsibilities are different, the shares must be different to maintain justice.
Precisely. This whole system has to be viewed through the lens of mandatory financial responsibility, or nafaka.
Nafaka.
The financial burden of the entire family unit, provision for the wife, children, sometimes dependent relatives, is placed exclusively and mandatorily on the shoulders of the husband and male relatives. The wife has no such mandatory duty. This single rule is the linchpin of the entire system.
Wait, just pause there because that financial pipeline is huge. Are you saying that no matter how rich a woman is, she is never legally obligated to spend her money on her husband or the household?
That is precisely the law. Her wealth is solely hers. Let's trace this financial responsibility pipeline throughout her life.
Right.
If she is unmarried, her father or male guardian is fully and legally responsible for her maintenance, her housing, her food, her clothing, everything.
And when she marries?
Once she marries, her husband immediately assumes that total responsibility. The wife is not obligated to contribute a single penny to household expenses. She can work, she can earn millions, but that money remains exclusively hers to save, invest, or spend on herself. The husband cannot legally demand she contribute.
And then there's the mehr, the mandatory gift.
Yes, the mehr. A sum of money or property agreed upon at the time of the marriage contract. This is given to the wife, and she keeps it entirely. It's hers.
So she enters the marriage with zero financial obligation for the household and a mandatory gift of capital.
Exactly. And this mandatory provision continues into old age. When she is older, it becomes her son's responsibility to provide for her, and she actually retains a right to a portion of his inheritance as well.
Often from the double share he received in the first place.
Right. From cradle to grave, the woman is the beneficiary of mandatory financial support from the men in her life.
This completely reframes the distribution calculation. The man is required to provide the nafaka. The woman is required to be provided for. It seems like the law is structuring the economic stability of the entire family unit, not just individuals.
That's the ultimate goal, the economic stability of the family. So let's go back to that classic example. A father dies, leaves a son and a daughter. The son inherits twice as much.
Why?
Because the son's inheritance, that larger share, is not disposable income. A significant portion, often all of it, especially if he has a wife and children, must be spent immediately on the people he is legally obliged to provide for. He has to house them, feed them, educate them.
But the daughter?
The daughter receives her smaller share, but crucially, she has no obligation to spend it on her household or her family's general expenses. Her husband carries that entire burden. So the man gets double because of his corresponding mandatory legal responsibilities that benefit others.
While the woman receives her share as pure, disposable personal wealth.
Exactly.
This sounds like the woman is actually economically protected in a way the man is not. She has full legal control over her inheritance, while also being guaranteed maintenance from her husband's wealth.
She is in a far more secure, long-term economic position. Her inherited wealth remains solely hers, untouched, for her own security, her own savings, her enjoyment.
And at the same time,
her husband's wealth, including his doubled share of inheritance, must legally and mandatorily be spent for her benefit on the household and on their children.
so if the man gets 200 units and the woman gets 100,
The man must immediately use his 200 units to support the family. The woman keeps her 100 units while benefiting from the man's 200 units. If we look at the family's total security, she's the one with the secure nest egg, while the man is the mandated high-risk investor in the family's future.
But I need to introduce a point of, a real challenge here, because the modern world has changed a lot since the 7th century. We're seeing modern Muslim women who choose to work, they choose to earn, and they choose to contribute to the household.
Of course.
Does the law adapt to that choice? If she contributes equally, does her inheritance share increase?
That's an excellent, necessary question. The legal framework remains constant. Her contribution is considered a gift. It's voluntary charity, tzedakah, not a legal obligation.
So it doesn't change her legal status?
It doesn't. If she chooses to contribute, she does so out of generosity. She still retains the right to demand that her husband compensate her for household expenses if she feels he is neglecting his mandatory duty. The law doesn't penalize her for being professionally successful. Her inheritance share doesn't automatically increase simply because she chose to work, because the mandatory legal burden of nafaka still rests entirely on the man.
The system is designed to provide a financial floor for the woman then, regardless of her personal wealth, ensuring she's never financially beholden to anyone.
Precisely. The system is designed against exploitation and for security. If the man squanders his doubled inheritance, he has failed in his duty and still has to provide for his family from his other earnings. If the woman keeps her half share safe, she is financially secure and still provided for.
So that distinction between justice based on responsibility and superficial mathematical equality, that's the key.
That's the key takeaway here.
Okay, that distinction, justice over equality, is absolutely crucial. We've covered polygamy as a restriction, inheritance as a system of financial justice. Now we come to the final and perhaps the most emotionally charged ruling. Surah An-Nisa, verse 34. This is the verse that critics claim commands men to beat women. We have to address this head on.
We do.
And this is a challenging perception to counter, especially when you hold it up against the powerful context of the Prophet Muhammad's own character.
It seems like a massive contradiction.
It does. How could the man who delivered this message, who famously said, "The best of you is the one who is best to his wife, and who never ever raised his hand against any of his wives," how could he permit or command such an act? That contradiction suggests a severe misunderstanding of the verse's intent.
There is a critical universal nuance being missed when this verse is just ripped out of its full context. We have to read the verse as a prescriptive set of steps, starting with the husband's defined role, which is the exact opposite of an aggressor.
How does the verse begin?
It begins by defining the husband's fundamental duty. Men are caretakers, protectors of women.
Protectors.
The Arabic term used here carries the meaning of being responsible for the physical and financial well-being of the family. By definition, a caretaker and a protector does not inflict harm. On the contrary, their role is to ensure no harm comes to the other person.
So that protective definition, it immediately colors the entire interpretation of what follows. It makes any interpretation of violence immediately suspect.
It has to.
Okay, so it's already established that the husband's role is one of guardianship, not aggression. But let's look at who this ruling is even addressed to. The source material is very clear. This cannot be applied to all women. It refers only to a specific, narrow group engaging in a specific destructive act called nushuz.
That is the key technical term, nushuz. The woman engaging in this behavior is called a nasheza. And the verse itself is structured by contrasting two types of wives, the saleha and the nasheza.
The righteous and the bird.
What would you call the other?
The defiant, maybe? The saleha woman is described as devoutly obedient and guard the honor of their husbands in their absence. This means she guards her chastity, her modesty, and the core trust of the marriage when her husband is not there.
So an Asheza woman, by contrast, is doing the opposite. And we're not talking about, forgetting to do the dishes or having an argument about the budget.
Not at all. We are talking about a situation that feels like profound emotional sabotage.
Sure.
The kind of behavior that in any marriage, regardless of religion, threatens the core trust and integrity of the family. What does that behavior actually look like?
The sources define nushuz as extreme willful rebellion that fundamentally breaches the trust of the marital contract and threatens the family's honor. This includes actively seeking attention from non-mahram men she shouldn't be interacting with that way, trying to appear attractive to them, behaving casually or carelessly in her interactions, and generally creating an atmosphere of defiance, disrespect, and constant conflict at home. This isn't just domestic friction, it's a situation where the marriage is actively deteriorating toward collapse.
So if a marriage is at this critical point of emotional sabotage, where the husband feels his honor and the family's stability are gravely threatened, what would happen historically and even today without a legal framework?
Historically and tragically, a man whose honor felt threatened by perceived infidelity or defiance would often resort to uncontrolled, brutal violence. No restrictions, leading to injury, psychic abuse, or even murder. This is still true in many cultures across the globe that lack religious or legal guidance on marital conflict.
So the Qur'an solution, just like with polygamy, isn't to encourage violence.
It's not to encourage or command it. It's to step in and restrict the husband who would otherwise resort to that uncontrolled violence. The verse puts mandatory limits on the reaction and structures it into a therapeutic process.
This is the genius of it. It prevents spontaneous rage-fueled violence by mandating a three-step sequence that has to be followed before any final restricted action can even be considered.
It forces the husband to cool down and try reconciliation first.
So what's step one?
Step one is the verbal warning, or was, and the Arabic root of this verb is beautiful and significant. It means to advise with love and compassion, to give counsel that truly touches the listener's heart.
So it's not shouting.
It's explicitly defined as not shouting, not harsh words, not a judgmental lecture. It requires the man to genuinely attempt reconciliation first, appealing to her intellect and her faith, seeking to repair and heal the relationship. That pause is the critical element that prevents spontaneous escalation.
Okay, so if that compassionate verbal counsel is given over a fair amount of time, a sustained, loving attempt to resolve it, and it still fails, then step two is mandated. Separating the beds, or hajar. And the nuance in the Arabic phrasing here is crucial, isn't it?
It is. The ayah uses the phrase wajurahuna fil madaj, meaning leave them alone in their beds.
Leave them alone in their beds.
Exactly. The established scholarly interpretation is not that the man throws the wife out, but that the man is the one who should sleep elsewhere, on the couch, in another room, while allowing the wife to remain in the marital bed.
That is a fascinating interpretation. He's saying, I refuse to be intimate or next to you right now because of your destructive behavior. But he's still respecting her status and comfort as the mistress of the house. It's disapproval combined with dignity.
And it's a powerful, non-violent psychological tool. The sources highlight the weight of this for a married woman who shares a deep emotional bond. The lack of intimacy, attention, and connection over several days, when the distance is caused by her own actions, it becomes immensely heavy.
So it forces introspection.
It forces mandatory introspection, pain, and eventually self-blame. She's forced to question her faults, her priorities. This structured emotional distance, this forced cooling-off period, it eventually compels one or both spouses to break the silence and have the difficult, honest dialogue needed for resolution.
So step two is essentially a forced, nonverbal cooling-off period. It's like what modern counselors might call a structured separation, designed to force resolution through emotional distance rather than physical aggression.
And only if both the compassionate verbal counsel and the therapeutic separation, hajar fail, and the nashu's behavior continues, meaning the marriage is now truly in dire straits and the family honor is still at grave risk, only then does the Qur'an permit the final restricted last resort.
And this is the step that causes all the controversy. Given the risk of abuse, how have scholars ensured that this last resort remains a symbolic act and not a license for violence?
This is where the strict prohibitions imposed by the Prophet's own teachings are paramount. The action is so hedged by restrictions that it becomes highly symbolic.
What are those rules?
The core rules are absolute. Hitting the face is strictly forbidden. It cannot be done in a way that leaves marks, breaks bones, causes pain, or causes any injury whatsoever. It's also forbidden to use anything thicker than a silak,
Which is a small, thin twig used for brushing teeth.
a tiny twig, or even a folded piece of cloth. Many scholars insist that the weight of the object used should not be heavy enough to cause even minor pain.
Wait, if the material used is something like a toothbrush twig, then the intent cannot possibly be physical pain.
It can't be.
The intent has to be purely psychological.
Precisely. The goal is not physical correction, but psychological notification. It's intended to be a highly restricted, symbolic act, a wake-up call to the Nashiza woman to realize the gravity of her mistake and the imminent threat to the marriage.
It's like shaking someone gently by the shoulders to snap them out of it.
That's a good analogy. The goal is protecting family unity and correcting the destructive behavior where, as the source states, the soul is hit, not the body.
And what if a man abuses this? If he crosses those lines?
If this final restricted action is misinterpreted or abused, the woman or her family has the legal right to report the abuse. The state, the qadi or judge, must intervene through arbitration and can compel the husband to end the marriage if the abuse continues. The system is layered with protections against the violent man.
So that distinction between a symbolic action meant to convey gravity and a punitive act meant to inflict pain, that's the critical element lost in translation. And the ultimate proof that this is an extreme restriction, rather than a common practice, it remains the Prophet himself.
He never once practiced this. He actively discouraged those who did hit their wives, classifying those men as not the best of men.
So it underscores that while the permission exists for the absolute direst emergency and is designed to control a potentially violent man,
The highest moral example demonstrated that the best conduct is to never use it. The law restricts the worst behavior, but the spiritual example encourages the best behavior.
this exploration has been exhaustive. We've seen how polygamy is a highly conditional restriction for societal necessity, not a mandate for male entitlement.
Right.
How inheritance is a structured system of financial justice tied to mandatory male financial responsibility, and how Surah An-Nisa 34 is a three-step marital therapy designed to prevent spontaneous violence by forcing reconciliation and only allowing a symbolic, non-injurious last resort.
And if we synthesize all these points, we see a consistent legal system. It's designed for the security and justice of the woman. It neither elevates men above women nor undermines women's fundamental value. Instead, the rulings define specific roles with commensurate responsibilities and mandatory protections.
And it seems many people are actually finding this structure attractive. I want to reference that truly compelling statistic again.
Yeah.
4 out of 5 people who convert to Islam in the United States today are women.
It's an incredible statistic.
They are looking beyond the headlines, they're doing their own research, and they're finding in the religion a structure where they feel safe, secure, and valued. They're finding a financial floor that protects them, a legal framework that guards their honor, and a system that attempts to regulate the most challenging aspects of human relationships.
That phenomenon speaks volumes about the actual lived experience versus the media critique. When people examine the structure outside of prejudice, they discover a system designed for longevity and protection, even in the most exceptional circumstances.
Which leads us to our final thought.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. We are human beings. We question, we reason, we constantly search for the most fair, balanced, and equitable system for regulating the relationship between men and women.
But our systems keep failing.
Human systems perpetually evolve, they fail, and they lead to widespread moral consequences, like those infidelity statistics we cited.
So the question is,
Who is best equipped to set the most fair and enduring balance? Is it fallible humans, swayed by culture, emotion, and political power? Or is it the law set by the eternal and perfect Creator, the one who designed human nature itself? That is the ultimate question of faith and reason that remains after the facts have been laid bare.
thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration gives you the tools to understand the complexity and nuance behind these crucial rulings. We'll see you next time.